you're going to start something here, and this may not be the right drug.
Mm-hmm.
This may not be the right dosage. It may take you a year to get there.
Right.
But as long as you know what your goal is and you're keeping track of some things to sort of help yourself navigate, I think you can always find something that solves your problem to some level. It's just you have to be willing to like have honest conversations about, okay, this I can deal with, but this side effect I can't.
Yeah.
And those sort of things.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Everything's Okay, a mental health podcast brought to you by Crazy Ant Media. Today, we're jumping back into another family sessions. Very excited about it. I'm joined by my beloved stepfather / second father, Levi. Super excited to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Thanks for having me.
Of course. It's awesome that we actually get to do this in person. Even though were we in Mississippi last time? I can't remember.
Yeah, you were, but we weren't. Yeah, we didn't do it in person. We still did it across Zoom or something like that. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, we're super excited about this today because it's, basically transformed the whole living room into a set. Hopefully it looks pretty decent for y'all. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about prescription medications, the pros, the cons, and everything in between. And it's a very interesting topic because I personally have never had or done prescription pills either recreationally or for my own mental sanity, but I know my siblings have gone through that whole process. You've gone through the process. Mom's gone through the process. So overall, just before we dive into it, what are your thoughts on prescription medications?
My first thought, honestly, is how complex even the discussion is. I think it's difficult to make any like black and white judgments on anything.
Yeah.
And it's interesting the perspective I have now doing benefits at work as well.
Yeah.
Because we see all the prescription spend on the back end. So when we get into like some of the media stuff, there'll be things there that are going to like, yeah, we've seen that advertisement and then it shoot up. So from a personal level, I've been through some things, and you're right, like other members of the family have, and even like when the littles were young, we dealt with some things there. But yeah, I think it's always it should be a complex discussion and decision. So.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a very interesting thing because like opioids and prescription medications, I feel like, it's one of those things that not a lot of people like to talk about because there is such a stigma behind like, this could be a bad situation. A lot of overdoses, obviously. We'll get into some numbers a little bit later. But yeah, I'm very curious too because trying to navigate and balance everything because everybody's chemical imbalance is different and trying to figure out what is going to work for one person but not work for the next person because it's a trial and error type of thing, right? Yeah. Even when you were going through your stuff and even still now, like, isn't it still trying to figure out right dosage with right medicines?
Yeah, the easiest example was most recently, a couple years ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and for a year just didn't even want to take anything because I was, the amphetamine thing and those sort of things are scary to kind of dive into. And then through some conversations with my doctor, we started one that was actually not an amphetamine. And it still ended up having some bad side effects. So I've actually recently stopped taking it and weaned off. Yeah. So I think it's a constant thing. I think it's evolving, especially with mental health drugs, especially. I think you're going to spend your whole life kind of playing that game a little bit.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, it's very interesting. And the topic does matter, like we said, because there is a lot of personal connection that we have to it in particular. But all across the country, people are dealing with mental health, and whether it be schizophrenia with chemical imbalances or whether it be, mood stabilizers or all of these different things. And especially like what always scared me about it was being numb. You always hear the story and hear the side effects of being numb that, they're not feeling anything rather than feeling bad or good. So, have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah, I think the design of some of these things, like, is to take the edge off.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you take that edge off, sometimes you get that where everything just feels flat.
Yeah.
So I've had that, and actually with a couple of different situations. One of them wasn't even a psych drug; it was actually a blood pressure medicine.
Oh wow!
That did the same thing. It impacted my mood way more than I expected. So, but yeah, I think, and I'm personally somebody who has always struggled with anything that made me think differently.
Yeah.
Or if some drugs will make you a step slow.
Yeah.
And that always just drove me crazy. It was immediately like, I got to do something else. so I'm picky about side effects in that way. But yeah, being flat is a problem with a lot of, the psych meds, especially.
Yeah, I can only imagine. But I mean, of course, key talking points throughout this whole conversation, we're talking about how medications can improve quality of life for chronic and mental health conditions, the role of proper diagnosis and medical supervision, stories of medications that made a real difference for you specifically, and breaking the stigma, of course, behind medications as a legitimate form of self-care. And also understanding that needing help doesn't actually mean weakness, because I mean, you come from the 90s, you grew up in the 90s, so you were still part of that culture of the man up, do what you can to be as good as possible while also shoving it down. So I mean, when did you first start taking any type of mood stabilizers or any sort of medications like that?
So as far as psych meds go, it would have been much later, for that very reason. I grew up with my parents. We didn't take ibuprofen.
Oh wow!
Unless you were hurting pretty bad,
right.
You know what I mean? Like it was one of those things. And I think it's helped me later in life, but it's one of those things where if it hurts a little, you're good.
Yeah.
And you need to know how much something hurts before you overreact to it or whatever. But yeah, as far as being comfortable reaching out and seeking out any kind of psych meds, that would have been later, probably even post-college. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't necessarily using other things to accomplish the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think when you bring up the opioid thing, I think that's a major piece of that. Is a lot of people are using that because it's easier to access and you don't have to admit some of the things you don't want to admit about yourself,
right,
in order to get something that's ultimately filling that same need, but just in a worse way.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, you think about all of the different scenarios. There's people in our lives in general, especially on my mom's side, who self-medicate regularly, probably even though they need to be diagnosed with something and then actually prescribed something. Because you think about all the people who just go through our family who, marijuana just specifically, who numb themselves, or, I mean, we have a lot of alcoholics in the family too. So, I mean, that's kind of how they self-medicate basically, which is not good because but they're also a very blue collar type of family. And I'm sure a lot of it comes from that, because I remember a couple years ago, there was a show that was based on a real life event called Dope Sick. And it was about the opioid epidemic and Purdue Pharma coming in like rural counties and like Vermont and things, especially coal mine counties where, these people would be hurting after a long day's work and then get prescribed like Oxycontin and things like that, to where like they get super addicted to it. And then when the doctors realize that they are addicted to it, then they start looking for other drugs like heroin or something. But yeah, it is very interesting because like it is a very slippery slope that I feel like a lot of drug addicts who probably go into homelessness and things like that, who start off with prescription medication that starts with, my back's hurting, I had this happen, workman's comp or anything like that. And then it goes to heroin or fentanyl, especially nowadays on the streets. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I mean, have you ever personally seen anybody go through something like that, where they start off with like regular medication, but then transition into harder drugs or alcohol?
Honestly, I had an issue pretty young, and that's how it started. The medication, I had an injury and the medication wasn't prescribed, but we knew how to get it.
Right.
And it starts out as, okay, I'm just going to take this until I feel better. And then eventually feeling better changes from feeling better physically to feeling better mentally.
Yeah.
And things like that. And so it's an easy path to go down. There's very little, at least at the time, there's very little resistance. It's a little different now. But But my dad recently had his neck surgery, and he had a similar experience where, he has been anti-pain meds my whole life,
right,
and didn't want to take them. And this one, they told him when he had it, they're like, it's going to hurt so bad you're going to have to. So then he starts taking them, and then not long after that, he started having psychological effects.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, and he's like, well, we got to stop this now.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think if you have that kind of willpower, if you have that structure in your life, it's a little easier to let go of. But you can definitely see, anybody who's taken those for an extended period of time can definitely see the path. Oh yeah, this could get ugly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different things too that I feel like you could go down, because you were an athlete in high school and played football constantly, and you had 3 concussions.
Yeah, I mean, diagnosed, no, but yes. I mean, what they would call a concussion then was different than what you would call a concussion now.
Yeah.
Back when I was playing, basically, if you could walk straight, you were good.
Oh my goodness.
And I got hit once and came off the field, took my helmet off and puked.
Right.
And now they would immediately, like, you're out for a week, and you have to see doctors to be released.
Yeah.
But at the time, they're like, "Can you go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can go."
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that was just the culture then. And but I think too, like, there was a lot of these things that people didn't understand. And, the concussion thing kind of goes along with the prescription medicine stuff, in that we just weren't there yet.
Yeah. It is very interesting too, because I remember when I was working at the news station a couple of years ago, and they, like, churches specifically, they had these, it was kind of like blood drives, or like, after Mardi Gras, Ash Wednesday and things like that. But it was kind of like that, where people would literally have a drive-through line where they would drop off their prescription medication if they weren't using it anymore. Yeah. It's like, hey, this is important. Like, the amount of dependency that the country specifically has on these is immensely worse than what it was back in the day. And I mean, especially with it being so much easier to get. I mean, like, there's so many different drugs, specifically opioids or like benzodiazepines and things like that are street level drugs basically now, that were originally prescription, that turned into such a crazy thing. But I remember when I was younger, my older brothers on my dad's side, they loved like Xanax and Percocet, and like, crush them up, put them in a joint, like that type of thing. And that always scared the crap out of me.
And rightfully so.
Like, the way that they would nod off or like just be so out of it, it really did remind me of like a heroin effect. So it was one of those things that I always just wanted to stay away from. But I mean, because you came from a small town in Ohio, so I mean, you said you knew where and how to get things, but like, with it being kind of rural like that, was it ever something that you felt like any of your friends or anybody around you had problems with?
I don't know. I mean, I think that more people had problems with something like alcohol. Yeah. But that was sort of a tag along. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you had people who, like, especially in high school, there's those kids who they can't wait to a party. Yeah, the party culture. Yeah, and so like those kids could have very well had issues with them. But I think it always went along with drinking for the most part. But there was a lot of marijuana too in that community, which was interesting at the time. But yeah, I think it was all sort of in that same, we're just experimenting with things. I think when it starts to get ugly, it kind of, people disappear a little bit. Yeah. Especially if the kind of crowd we hung out with were athletes and things like that. Yeah. So there were people that played sports for a while, and then all of a sudden they kind of stopped doing all that and they started partying a little more, but you don't necessarily keep up to know what's going on with them. But yeah, I mean, it was available then. And when I think about it being such a small area, it's wild that you could just get pretty much what you wanted even then. Yeah. So
trying to navigate that whole situation, especially being so young, I feel like, the more and more that your age and then my age demographic, like, it started to come out of it with my younger siblings, I feel like, but like, especially 80s kids, 90s kids, early 2000s kids, there was a lot of growing up before you actually were an adult, I feel like. But that was kind of taken away with like the the Gen Alpha and like the generations that came up in the 2000 teens. I feel like, because my siblings, I felt like, didn't necessarily, of course they have their own traumas and went through things like that, but I don't think they had to grow up in the capacity that I feel like that my generation did, or your generation. And I feel like it's like a trickle down thing too, because mom's generation compared to your generation, I felt like you had it a little bit more lax, and then I had it more lax, but and then it just like became super lax. But it's interesting because like from where we come from, like in the 50s, the baby boomers, like very much tough love, right? Like I mean, adults, and I'm sure like your parents, specifically your dad, like probably didn't have like the best relationship with their dad, because men were so like standoffish to basically everyone. So like the amount of like growing, I guess, softening, but also like coddling, right? Like the amount of
swing too far
how that changed, I think it was so interesting. And I think part of it was good, but also part of it was bad, because we are at a point where I feel like kids nowadays aren't growing up as fast as they should, because of that, right?
Yeah, and it's a swing. I mean, and I think most things do this. You see it in politics, you see it with prescriptions, you see it with any number of things, is you'll swing somewhere where it's too strict one way, and then it'll become too lax. And everybody's always trying to, I think whether they realize it or not, are trying to find that middle ground. And you're right, like parents got more friendly, for lack of a better term, through the generations, and then it got to a point where, like with your younger siblings, we were almost too much that way, and they didn't have enough structure, and they didn't learn enough things necessarily to be adults at 18, like you used to have to be, but the world's kind of set up that way now, so it's weird.
It is. Well, and especially like family wise and economic wise, because I mean, it's hard as hell to move out. If you're 18, there's no way you're moving out by yourself.
Yeah, you can't live by yourself on like a fast food salary or a retail salary or anything like that. Like you'd have to have 5 or 6 roommates to make it work.
It's absolutely insane thinking about where it was when I first moved out and was on my own. I had a studio apartment that was like $419 a month, and like that was amazing. I felt like the difference between how all of these generations like see each other, then adapt to current day times and the current day climate, it's a very interesting thing to try to navigate, and then just think about where we'll be in 10 years, right? That's absolutely wild, because my wife and I were just talking about hers and her retirement, and like yesterday, and she's like, 2055 or 20 something. She said something. And I was like, what? Like to even think about that number is insane, because I don't even know where we'll be, but where the world will be, where the country will be. And I mean, that brings up a lot of anxiety too, because like the world does change so quickly without you even realizing it. And then you look around one day and you're like, what happened? Where's it at? Where's the world that I grew up in, right?
Well, and I think a lot of that, it has a lot to do with too the prevalence of mental health issues. Like, because if you think about the speed at which the world's changing, like we're accelerating really fast right now.
We are.
I mean, if you look back 10 years, it was a completely different place. You go back another 10 and it's just like, what? You know what I mean? And so 20 years from now, we're going to be even further along. And I don't think people necessarily know how to take it all in. So I think that's a lot of it. I mean, you see the prevalence of anxiety going up exponentially. And I think and as a reaction to it, prescription meds coming out and those sort of things, people trying to solve these problems. But I don't know that there's an answer to that. I think we just kind of have to write it out and see. But
I completely agree. And even to the point where like, I feel like even maybe some of the younger generation, I've seen a lot of it on social media where like they kind of stave off any partying type of stuff. Like you have, like we used to call them, what are they called? Straight edge. We used to have straight edge. That's what we called them, straight edges, like that, where they didn't do any partying, they didn't drink, none of that stuff. But I feel like you're finding more of that because of the lack of developmentally into adulthood.
And they're not. experimenting as much. Some of it too has a lot to do with social media, I think, too. Because if you think about if you had social media to the level that we do now when you were in high school, what kind of drama that might have caused.
Oh man,
you know what I mean? And I think the same thing. I was like, it'd been a nightmare. You know, so I think there's a little bit of that where kids feel like they have to be more put together on every second of the day because that's what they live in. So I think that has a lot to do with it. But along with that, though, I mean, you do have the exposure for a lot of mental health stuff too online, and so they have access to information we didn't have to. So there's, again, always kind of
because it is a weird thing, because I definitely do feel like there's more suicides now, or at least 100%. We know about them more now because of online. But I do think it is more because the coast where we live, Gulf Coast, Mississippi, it is a very small community, even though, you know, it ranges from Moss Point all the way to Bay St. Louis. Like that's a long, like highway 90 that you go through, and you go through multiple towns through that. But every single town is experiencing so many teen suicides, and especially by prescription drugs. And I mean, because they're able to get it so easily. But I mean, I think we're at a point too where, and I hate to even say it because I mean, we were kind of in this situation too, but where like the parents are so lax that they are giving their children prescription drugs without them being prescribed to their child specifically, you know, not even like just regular, oh yeah, we'll drink together, oh yeah, we'll smoke together when you get 18, but actually like, oh, that sounds like what I have, so let me give you some of my prescription drugs. Like that's I feel like that's probably happening more often today than it was way back in the day.
I think there's a serious concern about stuff like that. And again, from a work standpoint, it's something that we send communications out on a regular basis. It's like, hey, make sure you're managing your prescriptions, and if you're not taking something, make sure you cancel it. And because like you're right, that initial sharing, or just a kid opening a cabinet and going, hey, I think she takes this for that, or we've talked about her taking this for that, and then, you know what I mean? So I think there's a lot of that. And it's a dangerous thing, especially because most drugs don't work the same on children as they do as adults. So, there's definitely some concern there.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, getting back to like your own personal experience with trying to navigate like just either the dosage or the right medication, did you ever have any particular medication that like were mood stabilizers that weren't good for you and you had to come off of them quicker than normal?
I've never had one that I would consider good. I think it depends on, and it's sort of how my philosophy on this has changed as I've gotten older. What are you trying to accomplish, and what are you willing to give up as a result? Because there is always a give and take. I mean, you're going to have side effects to things. So I think dosage wise, I think you're always playing a game with those. I'm skeptical of people who have said, well, you know, this is my dosage and I've been taking that for 5 years. And I'm like, that's not been my experience. You know what I mean? So, but I think it is a game. It's a balance, and it's a process more than a golden ticket kind of thing. And I think that's one thing that I try to talk to people about, even at work, is that you're going to start something here, and this may not be the right drug. This may not be the right dosage. It may take you a year to get there. But as long as you know what your goal is, and you're keeping track of some things to sort of help yourself navigate, I think you can always find something that solves your problem to some level. It's just, you have to be willing to like have honest conversations about, okay, this I can deal with, but this side effect I can't, and those sort of things. But one thing I do, and recently with the ADHD med, is a similar thing, is I make sure I journal twice a day, try to just take an inventory of how I feel. Because what I found is, like, you start taking something, in the first few days you notice, right?
For sure.
And then and sometimes you don't notice when things aren't working as well for it can be weeks, or you don't notice side effects that will oftentimes be delayed, because not all of the side effects on a drug will happen the first week you take it. Sometimes it takes a build up for them to, like with this most recent ADHD med, I was 4 months into taking it before I even started to notice the side effects that I didn't like. So I think journaling that and taking an honest sort of look at how you feel and forcing yourself to write it down makes it a little easier to kind of continually evaluate. But that's what I would say is like, I don't think there's an answer. I think it's a process.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, was there anything that like you felt like once you got off of it, you felt like you had to loosely wean off of, or how does that process work when you're taking something like that? Like, do you wean off of it? Do you take less and less and less, or do you just stop cold turkey?
Almost all of them. I mean, there's some of them that aren't this way.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is it depends on the side effects, but almost all of them, especially mental health drugs, the doctors will tell you to wean off of. And sometimes that's not a long process. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 days. Sometimes it's a couple weeks.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes it's just taking it in half for a few days and then kind of backing down.
Yeah.
Now obviously it would depend on the side effects. Like with the ADHD med, one of the thing that made me stop it was I started having suicidal ideations. Which to me was a weird side effect because you always read it and you assume that when you're taking something that you're going to have the feeling that you want to commit suicide.
Right.
And even though that's not really what the term even means, but I didn't realize that, like personally realize it until I started experiencing it. And then all of a sudden it was like, I didn't want to commit suicide.
Right.
But I was thinking it.
Yeah.
Like it would just pop into my head on a regular. And it was all of a sudden like, okay, wait a minute, where's this coming from? And then it, as the severity increases, it's like, okay, this is not something I want to continually have thoughts about.
Right.
Even though there was no urge and there was no danger, I never felt that way, but it was just like, that's strange.
Yeah.
And so for something like that, we weaned off of it much quicker than you might necessarily if it was just, a mild sort of side effect. Just because you want to kind of stop that as soon as possible. But
that's crazy because if I'm remembering correctly, I think our first conversation that we had on this podcast, like I think you even said that you don't really ever have suicidal thoughts. So I mean, that's strictly from the medication.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was weird. It wasn't like because when you go to mental health professionals a lot, they always ask you, well, do you have a plan? Do you have all these things? Yeah. And there was none of those things.
Yeah.
But I would just be sitting somewhere thinking about how I might die or how I might kill myself.
Yeah.
And it was flat, no emotion or anything like that. So it was such a weird thing.
Right.
I was like, okay, but once I was journaling, and once I journaled it for like a week and it came up like daily, it was like, okay, this must be what they mean here.
Yeah.
Because I was waiting for like that urge, you know what I mean? Because that would scare me enough to stop it. But it's like, this must be what they mean. And after talking with my doctor,
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So it was completely from like I stopped it, like by the time I was off of it, 2 or 3 days later, all gone.
Wow.
So it's like
wild.
Yeah, it was a real weird experience. So.
And that's the type of thing that people are afraid to start prescription medications for because of things like that, because of like either feeling numb or having those suicidal thoughts. Because I know, like specifically with members of Emily's family in particular, they have expressed the same feelings to where I think it was after a surgery they had. And of course, being completely anonymous and things like that. But I think it was after a surgery they had, and they had to take some medication, and then like it started to turn into that effect. And that's just so wild to me because it is a catch-22 to where like this thing is supposed to be helping you so much, but then it also has such negative side effects because not only mentally, but there are some like physical side effects that can happen too, like hair loss, like stomach problems, no appetite, things like that. That's why I would be personally scared if my doctor was like, hey, I think you need to get on a prescription drug for your mental or for honestly anything else. Like even after I had my wisdom teeth taken out and I was prescribed some hydrocodone, I could tell that I was enjoying that too much rather than, something that should have just been for the pain. I was like, let me just keep taking them. And then like, there's somebody in our family who enjoys like, I'm going to finish off the bottle. Let's not finish off the bottle. We got to be better than that. But yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting thing too, because there are all of these different gateways. A lot of people use the term gateway for marijuana specifically, but I think what all of these different things do. Even going to the doctor can be a potential gateway for things, because like, especially with mental health, like a person can lie to their doctor
100%.
and about their mental health, and the doctor doesn't know it from either fact or fiction, so they have to prescribe that. So that's something that I feel like is scary. And with like us having family members who have tried all different things, either recreationally or medically, and having to be put on different things, were you ever scared at a certain point for any of our family members because of their prescription drug use?
I can't think of anybody off the top of my head other than, honestly, your siblings.
Yeah.
And again, this was when they were young.
Yeah.
And school related,
of course, always.
And and it's one of those things where it became, it's difficult because you want your kids to be successful,
always, and
you don't want to put them in environments where they're not going to succeed, and yet at the same time, school is going to be difficult for people regardless, depending on where you come from and what your lifestyle is like and all those sort of things. And they had challenges going in. Yeah. And then you have teachers saying, yeah, they definitely have this. And then, so then we take them to doctors, and then we get differing opinions there. And then you start to give them something, and you don't like the way it's making them react, but everybody in school thinks they're doing great. Right. So it's like, how do you balance these things? Yeah. So I think that was probably the biggest concern, is that it's an impossible decision to make, I think, for children, and feel like you know what you're doing. Yeah. I think it's just so scary because they can't really tell you how they're feeling. Yeah. They're just not mature enough mentally. Especially in their teenage years. Yeah. They're already going through so much developmental-wise. And then, and 6 months apart can be a completely different mindset, depending on how you're maturing and things like that. So it's really difficult to make those sort of decisions. Yeah. I think that's the place where I've had the most fear. With myself, I'm very much like you are afraid of what's going to come next. So I'm hyper vigilant. Yeah. But with them, there's no way to know that. And there's no way to know really how it's making them feel, especially like you said, as teenagers, because they're not going to tell you anyway. Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of that. It's a dangerous thing. And I think that's a lot of where a lot of people's problems come from as adults oftentimes, is things that start happening when they're teenagers. Yeah. So you're skeptical too, is like, do I want to teach them that, hey, this drug is going to make you better at this? Right. Because then later in life, are they going to be looking for things to make them better at that, even if it's not the same thing? Yeah. So I would say that's the one where the fear was pretty intense.
Oh my goodness. I can only imagine. And I mean, completely switching from mental wise to cost and insurance wise. Like, of course we got to talk about this too, because a lot of it, especially for underprivileged communities and households, like, these drugs are expensive. And especially if like the doctor's telling you, the therapist is telling you that this is going to work. But I mean, if one of the adults is already working 2 jobs and still can't afford the prescriptions, like, I would talk about that. Like, I mean, from the very beginning stages of your journey through where you are now, I mean, was there ever a time where you felt like you just couldn't pay for prescription medications?
I think we've been pretty lucky. Yeah. There was a period where your mom and I were both working at places that didn't carry insurance. Right. But we weren't making enough where you guys weren't covered. Yeah. I've had situations where I've avoided things personally for myself. Yeah. Because of cost, but I think that's only magnified recently. Yeah. I mean, over the last 5 or 6 years, and again, from a work standpoint, this is why I know some of these things, but the cost of prescriptions is just skyrocketing. And there's so much more advertising for prescriptions.
It's crazy
that, like, when you'll see one start coming up on advertisements, and then we keep a list of our like most prescribed drugs and our most expensive drugs, right? And they will just months after will just shoot up. Like, it's insane. And for me, it doesn't make any sense because I see a drug on TV and I'm like, okay, even if I had that, I'm not going to tell a doctor what to prescribe me. Right. But there are people that do. Yeah. And so, and doctors are obviously influenced to it as well. They shouldn't be, but there's been plenty of those stories come out that they are as well. So yeah, I think it's dangerous where that goes. It's also dangerous the way the industry is set up because, a new drug isn't allowed to have generic versions for so long because of the patents and things along those lines. And people will, without even trying a generic drug, a generic version of something, even if it's out there, they will ask for the brand name label because that's what they've seen.
Right.
And doctors oftentimes are skeptical to go to generics unless it's been tested out for a long time. So sometimes there's a cheaper option available and somebody will still have to pay out of pocket so much more. And it's a gross thing from the business side. It's really kind of, it's sad that it's that complex and that there's that much money involved in your healthcare.
Yeah.
Because it's already a decision that's difficult to make.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Taking something that's not natural should be something that you think about, and having to weigh cost in that as well makes it that much more difficult. But yeah, there have been things that I've avoided taking that were probably detrimental for my health. I mean, luckily, most of my sort of chronic illness stuff, those drugs are pretty cheap now. So it's not that big of a concern. But yeah, we've been in a spot, a couple different times where it was,
I'm sure. Like, I mean, even in the position I am now, because I am 30, I'm off y'all's insurance. So freaking navigating that whole thing, to where I could either give $50 a week taken out of my check, which is it's United Healthcare, which isn't the best healthcare in first of all, or I looked at using my tax credit to have healthcare, but even on top of that, I would have still had to pay $250 a month. Or something like that. So, I mean, to the point where I don't have healthcare, but I am lucky enough to be attending school right now, and my wife works at this same college to where I'm able to go to the clinic for free. So I'm taking clear advantage of that. But yeah, as long as she works there, I'll be able to go there for free. So thank goodness for that. But of course, I still need to find a position to where I can actually have actual healthcare to where I am able to go do regular checkups. Because man, I tell you, my last regular checkup was probably 4 years ago, 5 years. Not good at all. I couldn't tell you when the last time my blood was drawn. It's super bad. But I mean, the landscape of the insurance industry and you talk about specifically the advertisement on TV is crazy. Our country, I believe, is the leader in advertisement for either prescription drugs or over-the-counter drugs, which I feel I don't have cable anymore. So when I go over to somebody's house and we're watching football or something and the commercials come on, I swear to you, 75% of them are prescription drugs. It's kind of crazy. And I feel like that's gone way up from when we were kids and we had cable back in the day. It's wild.
Yeah. It's funny to me too, that those companies can justify that spend.
Yeah.
Because they swear to you that they are making these drugs as inexpensively as possible so they can keep the healthcare costs down for their people and all those sort of things. And I'm like, yeah, but you're spending millions of dollars on advertising every year that nobody really needs. If we have to go to a doctor to get this anyway, it's not like I can call up the prescription company and say, hey, send this to me. So you're not even who are you advertising to? It's a dangerous thing. But I can tell you, we just completed our renewal for benefits for next year, and our insurance is seeing a 10% increase year over year. So you think at that pace, every 10 years, your costs are going to double.
Yeah.
And it's becoming a real burden on companies.
Yeah.
Because most companies pay about 80% of your insurance benefits. So what's coming out of your check, like you said, the $50 a week that would come out of your check, you got to figure if that's only 20%, there's another 80% there that the company is paying just for you to have that option. And then when you go to the doctor with that insurance, if most cases, it's an 80-20 split.
Yeah.
So then you're still paying 20% of your bill when you get there. You know what I mean? So it's not a cheap thing. It's one of those things that I think we're going to have to see some regulation around the industry soon.
Yeah.
They've been real good about the prescription stuff following sort of the opioid crisis. Not that I know that that's done, but
right.
there's been some push there, so it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's going to have to be more progress there for sure.
Yeah, completely agree. And I made sure to go and see most recently the CDC said approximately 46 people die each day in the U.S. due to overdoses from prescription pain medication. And that amounts to about almost 17,000 people per year, which is terrifying to even think about. And I mean, in your experience from the outside and from the inside, like, do you feel like therapy works better than prescription medication, or do you feel like they balance each other hand in hand, or what's your thoughts on that?
I would say it, again, kind of depends on what your goal is.
Yeah.
I think the problem, my fear with prescription drugs and my fear with people getting addicted and those sort of things is that you tend to think this prescription is going to make me better.
Yeah.
And what it really did, especially with mental health drugs, what they're really doing is just treating a symptom. They're not actually treating your cause most of the time, because even understanding what that cause is, it could be a wildly different thing, especially for mental health. So I think what I would say is therapy and other lifestyle changes can be just as effective, if not more, depending on what your goal is. Now, if you're depressed enough that you're considering suicide, go to your doctor, take what they tell you to take, get that part solved a little bit, and then let's dig into what the actual cause is, which I think is where therapy, exercise, sleep, diet, all those kind of things come in. And I think those things will eventually make it to where you don't need the prescriptions, especially for mental health. For most people, that's not always the case either. But, I think mental health especially is unique in that way. I think other things, like other chronic conditions, like I have high blood pressure.
Right.
I've lost weight. I've gained weight. It's never really changed. I've had high blood pressure since I was like 21. I drank a lot then. I don't drink it all now. It's still there.
Yeah.
So I think like there's just no answer to that for me except for a drug, which is unfortunate. I've had, I recently had some stomach issues, and that is like, okay, they just threw 4 prescriptions at me.
Yeah, they threw a lot at you.
And we've been weaning off of those as we go.
Yeah.
So I think for those kind of conditions, you do what you have to do to manage it. And then again, some lifestyle changes can help, but with mental health, especially, I feel like therapy and just understanding what makes you feel a certain way, like just an awareness of how you feel and what has potentially caused that can get you a lot of places where other things can't, unless we're talking about a full-on schizophrenia or something along those lines where there's just no, there's no options. So it's a severity thing.
Yeah.
I think your average person that has issues with anxiety and depression, like I think a lot of people do now, I think therapy and lifestyle changes are probably better for them. Long-term, short-term, it kind of depends on how severe.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's important too that you need to be comfortable with your doctor to have these conversations, because like if you feel like your doctor's a little shady, they're probably going to prescribe you something a little shady. So you should be sure you're with somebody who you're comfortable with, who you feel like you can have a conversation with about your body, so that you can get to the point to being okay. Because I know for me specifically, just with my anxiety and depression, man, that dopamine drip of just walking 4 or 5 times a week, it helps immensely. Like, I'm not a morning person. You know this. I am not a morning person at all. But like when I get up and have that hour and a half to myself first, it makes my day feel so much better. And I think just people spend too much time sitting on the couch instead of being outside the fresh air. Like even when you walk your dog, try to at least do almost a mile. It doesn't take that long. It's like 15 minutes, something like that. So I think getting back to a balanced diet, a decent diet, or at least making sure you're eating the 3 meals a day, because I know a lot of people either skip their meals or eat like shit 3 meals a day. And just an average
drinking water.
Drinking water. Hydration is so key. But yeah, it's been it's an interesting thing to go through because like we've been talking about a lot recently, and specifically me, but I've been talking about it with you and Mom.
Yeah.
Just transitioning, being more of a better man, being better as just a human being, and trying to be as mentally sane as possible. And I think that's the thing too. You just have to always put one foot in front of the other on how to make yourself better mentally, make yourself better physically, and to the people around you, because the people around you will also bring you that dopamine drip to that positivity, that enlightenment to different aspects on the world that you never even really thought about. So those things, yourself, your physical health, your mental health, and the people around you, 100%. I think that those three things will immensely get you further in life than, all of these different things. Of course, like you were talking about, if there's some serious stuff, please talk to your doctor. Please talk to your therapist. Yeah. Don't hesitate. Any of those things. It's very important. Again, these are our own personal experiences. We're not trained professionals, except on the benefits side. He's a trained professional on the benefits side. So yeah,
but talk to your doctor, please.
Yes, please talk to the doctor. It's important for the awareness, the accountability, and managing all of these different things. And medication is a tool. It's not a total solution. I think that's a big thing too. And we want to encourage everybody for professional guidance and have opening conversations like we're doing right now. It does not hurt to talk to people. That's why Dustin and I love to do this bi-weekly. It's our bi-weekly therapy session. It helps us get it all out with different people and things like that. But we want the listeners to take away life-changing benefits from things and also the real risk of things. So be sure to anticipate both of those before you enter in a situation like that with prescription medications. And but yeah, open dialogue between patients, families, doctors. It's very important, and it's important for you to walk away with a more balanced, informed view on modern medicine as well, because they're not supposed to be bad for you. They're supposed to help you. They're not supposed to be a scary thing, even though they are. But I mean, any last thoughts before we close this one out?
Yeah, I would just say, if anything, force yourself to check in on how you actually feel.
Yeah.
I think because there's so many people that kind of walk around in the world and don't realize how they feel until it gets to a 9 or a 10.
Yeah.
If you check in, even like I said, even just twice a day, for example, and just just make it a scale. Just go, okay, it's 9 o'clock today. Where am I at in, where's my comfort level? Am I in 8 or what? Just find a way to force yourself to do it, because tracking that over a long time will oftentimes make you realize, okay, I'm just having a bad day.
Right.
I don't feel like this all the time.
Yeah.
Because your brain will play tricks on you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you have a bad day, sometimes it feels like the last 2 weeks have been shit.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case. And that's one thing that I've learned specifically is, like, if I make sure I'm checking in, it's easier to realize when I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
And this moment sucks. Because, for lack of a better term or a better way to say it, your brain will lie to you.
It will.
So
completely agree. Agree. And as always, this podcast is for anyone who's ever had an uphill battle with mental health. Please be sure to reach out if you want to do it anonymously, if you want to do it publicly, whichever. We don't do last names, so please feel free to reach out. info@crazyantmedia.com. We love having a conversation. If anybody ever wants to come on the podcast, we're super open to that as well. We're just open to having conversations. That's what this podcast is for. And as always, you can subscribe, all the things, all the social media things, YouTube. Everything's OKP on social media and all the fun things. And always remember, guys, that everything's okay.